Okay, let's see, what else to expect? Visiting hours are limited. Phone hours are limited. And there's usually just a couple of common phones. Be courteous with the phones. There's going to be people with all kinds of issues. Some people are going to be anxious, depressed, and very withdrawn. Some people are going to be angry and maybe even explosive, which can be scary. I've had situations where someone got angry, and there's going to be people that are just that, and it might even be you acting bizarrely, and people are giving them wide, walking around them quite a ways, but just try to remember that everybody is there to receive help for their problem. And some people will see, if some people will see someone, say, who has schizophrenia or something, who's talking to themselves, and maybe your behavior is not on that level, and people have a tendency sometimes to say, I don't belong here with these people. I'm not that bad. I'm not like these people. There are people with different problems and in different degrees of different problems. And you're just because your disorder doesn't cause a more obvious symptoms, or maybe they do, but like I said, just remember they're there for different kinds of psychiatric problems, and you may run into someone who's there with bipolar disorder. There's some things you need to watch out for, though, in the hospital, and that I've discovered this. It's very bizarre, and you hate to say that it does happen, but it does, and I've witnessed it. Especially when people who are in with the same disorders, and for some reason people with bipolar disorder, they'll start to cluster up on the floor and, exchange notes on, well, what meds are you on? How long have you had it? Are you 1, 2? Do you, And there's this thing that makes people want to outdo each other, even if it's something negative. Like, oh, well, one time I was so manic, I blah, 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 blah. Oh, well, you think that's bad. I was so manic, or I've had 18 suicide attempts. Oh, that's nothing. I've had 22. It's just weird, but it really happens. And the exchange notes on medications, who's taking the most, and, and it's kind of silly, especially the medications, because, I'm the kind of person that some medications, I take a teeny tiny eensy dose and I get a good effect from it. Bragging about who's been in the hospital the longest and actually trying to stay in longer. Who's worse off instead of better off. I don't know where it comes from, but it's this phenomena that is very apparent. So be very careful with that, because then you start getting yourself, because it has happened to me, in that with the other people, and then you're starting to behave in the same way, where instead of wanting to go home and working to go home, you're doing things that keep you there, and then you go and brag about it. Don't think you're beyond it. It's easy to get sucked into. It's same thing happens with other things out in the world. Just brought into the hospital, but just be very aware of that. And alternatives to hospitalization. Well, if you are a danger to yourself or others, you probably need to be in the hospital where people can look in on you every 15 minutes. Sometimes if things aren't that bad or after hospitalization, people do day hospital or outpatient where they spend the day and they do the education and the group therapies and things like that, but then they go home in the evening. And it's like just like going to school. I had an experience with one outpatient place that did everything in their power to keep you there, saying you needed to stay, or they'd send you back to the hospital, and they tried to keep me there, and I just was like, none of these people ever graduate from the outpatient hospital. So I just quit before I became one of them, in and out, and never completely free from hospital. There was this one program where I was in the hospital, and after you went to this free Tuesday night group, aftercare group, it was free, and it was just like a group where you talked about coping with things, and they had a good result with people not ending right back in the hospital again. Another thing is, like this past winter, I had a really bad mixed episode, and I was like this close to being in the hospital, but because I lived with my mom, and at that time, no, it wouldn't have been this winter, it would have been the winter before, yeah, and still living with my mom, and she's very knowledgeable and aware and experienced with my disorder, that I was allowed to stay home. If I had been living alone and not had someone who knew what to watch for and who didn't know when to just walk up and say, "Are you feeling safe?" Or something, if I didn't have that, I would have been in the hospital, but I did have that. And fortunately, the fear was that I was very close to a point where I wouldn't have been able to tell the difference of what was real and not, as far as interpreting things and making decisions. And if that happens in the middle of the night and nobody's there, and you're thinking things are a certain way and they aren't at all, then that can be dangerous, and you don't even know that you're in a place that's dangerous. That's the scary part. That's why there has to be other people in your life that can make observations when you're not able to interpret your symptoms and where they're at. It made sense to me. I hope it made sense to you. Okay, so I think that's it. I don't think being in the hospital carries the stigma as much as it once did, because mostly now we just are adjusting medication and stuff, and it is so easy now to say, well, I have bipolar disorder. Yeah, I was in the hospital. I had to have my medication tweaked. That doesn't hold a lot of stigma. But I think my next video is going to be about choosing when and when not to tell people about the disorder. So that's it. Later.